Speaking to me now is Welsh boxing trainer, boxing manager, and sometimes boxing promoter or boxing promoter's assistant.
Involved in the promotions, yeah. I help to manage shows in Wales for Mark Pryor. I'm very fortunate that obviously Mo lets me put people on his shows, but obviously I have to have a hand in helping him run them. He's London based, but such a kind-hearted man. He's such a good guy. He wants to keep boxing alive in Wales, and obviously he allows myself, and to a certain degree as well, Gary Lockett's involved. I don't think he wants to be, but obviously he likes to try and get his boys regular work as well, and we all work together. But Mo's the main man.
So, like anyone who's been involved in Welsh grassroots boxing for the last 5-10 years or so, I'm not quite sure how long exactly, might recognise your face here and there, and some of the small hall shows and some of the bigger shows as well, helping out. How did you first become involved in boxing, Rich?
I've never really been at the gym from the age of 8. I've always been very candid. I was very skinny as a youngster. I know that's very difficult to believe, but as a youngster,
that's two of us, Rich.
I was. I was fighting at 10 stone up until I was 16, and I was picked on in school. So not all the time. I mean, bullying is a phrase which is thrown around. I mean, I suppose you could say a lot of it was hazing, and it's always the same. I think, like I said, I think bullying is thrown around. Suppose I was bullied to a certain extent a little bit. In a local area, I was skinny, I was small. Mother took me at the gym in Crinder Harlequins, and I never left. Boxing the amateurs. I was on the same sort of scene as not so much Joe. Joe was about to turn pro when I was in the seniors, but in the seniors with me, I had the likes of Gary Lockett, and I had the likes of Paul Samuels, the likes of Enzo Macronelli coming through later, and Joe Calzaghe turning pro at that time, but obviously he was alive on the scene. There was an amazing talent pool for Welsh boxing at that time, and I was around all these guys. I never remotely close to their talent. I'm not going to suggest that I did. I wasn't the greatest boxer in the world, but I loved it. And later on, I got my trainer's license. I've had my trainer's license from about the age of 21 in the amateurs with Crinder, and later on I was attracted to the flame of pro boxing. A lot of people were asking me, a lot of people trusted me and wanted me to work with them, and eventually I capitulated. So yeah, here we are today, and it's just added to my workload.
So starting right from the beginning, I mean, which sort of boxers have you worked with over the years?
Well, I started out with Jerome Samuels. It's kind of a funny story, and I wouldn't embarrass him by saying this. He's quite an open and honest kid. He's got tons of personality, bags of charisma. But I saw him in court because obviously I'm a solicitor. I do criminal law, and he was in a spot of bother. Nothing significant, nothing serious, but he was on a downward spiral. Didn't really have anywhere to live, and he said, "Look," he said, "I'm in a desperate spot. I know you're training the amateurs. Can I come back to the gym? Can I do this? Can I do that?" And I knew he was a pro at that time. He was 0-5. So he persuaded me to take him to get my British Border Control licence. I worked with him. I got him to 5-0 under me, and his last fight with me before we first parted company was against Di Jones for the Welsh title. He'd fought Di to a very, very close eliminator, and they thought it was such a good fight that they would make it into the Welsh title fight, and he beat Di literally with a final round victory. After that, other people wanted to come on board. I've worked with a lot of people, Bradley Price, Darren Price. I've worked with Rhys Saunders with me. We were fortunate enough to beat the highly touted at the time, Kerry Evans. Kerry Evans was 5-0, 6-0 maybe. I'm one of only about 3 or 4 men to stop Christian Late, the great journeyman who's recently retired. I can't explain to you how much respect I got for Christian, seeing him around the shows and stuff like that. Such a nice guy, and a massive loss for boxing to lose a guy like that who brings youngsters through. But I started off working with guys like that. Some more serious prospects started to come on board then. People like Jake Anthony. I've got some really good kids. I've got some guys who fight on the road. Robert Studzinski, who's well known and respected as a tough journeyman. Recently stopped Mitchell Preedy. I've got Spencer Thomas, who I always wanted to sign Spencer. I like the way he moves. He's a southpaw. He's tricky. He's a tough kid. Trying to get in fights has been very, very difficult. But I've got all these kids around me. I've got a few in the northeast as well. I've got a little connection. I got Joan Galau, big heavyweight up there. I've got about 10 guys in my books, I think. Some in the northeast, but mostly in Wales, obviously.
So you mentioned, Rich, you're a solicitor by day and a boxing trainer when you can squeeze it in. I just noticed from being around boxing for quite a while that at the lower levels, or even the British title level, European level, there's not actually that much money in boxing. There's a bit of a myth. So I guess you must. What is it about the sport that you love that you've given up so much of your time for?
I got into this to help people. Make no mistake. I could see that there were a lot of characters in boxing who were taking a lot more money than they should, not declaring money to boxers. I could see what was going on. Boxers knew what was going on. A lot of them were just happy to top up their wages. Maybe some of them don't have to work. They're just happy not to have to work and to follow their passion. But it's not right that money should be taken off them. Every cent should be taken off them. People were approaching me and saying that they knew this was going on. They wanted somebody they could trust, and they came to me. I've got a good background in law, not just criminal law, but obviously contract law, licensing law, stuff like that. And I just wanted to help people. And, if I make a few quid from it, then happy days. But as you say, at the bottom levels, at these levels, I'm losing more money than I am gaining. Trust me, I speculated that last year boxing probably cost me over £10,000. Genuinely cost me over £10,000. Angelo's been around me. Angelo Dragone over there. He's done a spot of training today. He knows what it's cost me. I'm very, very open with my finances. Everything with me is transparency. And boxing's cost me a fortune. But, maybe one day, one of these kids, British Championship, maybe a world title one day, who knows? And I'll get it all back. And if I do, happy days. But until then, it's about bringing kids along, promoting Welsh boxing, and just helping out the best I can. A lot of people say to me, they can't believe that somebody could be so giving, and that almost sounds like I'm some kind of martyr, or I'm perhaps being a little bit conceited. But it's not about that. I love the sport. I absolutely love the sport, and for me, making sure that the fighters get what they can out of it, making sure that people are safe, looked after, then that's the most important thing.
You mentioned there, or alluded to, boxers getting perhaps robbed, I suppose, for want of a better word, without giving any names, because we don't fancy a lawsuit, or I don't fancy being taken to court, and you can lose. And there are some people involved in it who you really would not expect to be involved in it. Well, without mentioning any names or promotional outfits or anyone, can you just give us some examples of some of the things that happen that I guess the fans don't realise? I've known boxers who've been told that the promotion hasn't done quite so well. They're going to have to take a wage cut, and I've heard of promoters having to put money in managers' bank accounts because they don't want to declare the full amount to the boxers. It's all just backdoor shenanigans and stuff, which you hear about them, and I'll be perfectly straight. It's difficult to know fact from fiction, but you hear things and you hear the same names over and over, and there's an old saying, no smoke without fire, and I don't, as a criminal law solicitor, I don't really like to throw that around, but because I've got plenty of clients who have been naughty boys in their younger days and have turned over a new leaf, and it'd be very easy to point the finger at those people, but they're reformed characters, or they've been misunderstood, or they've perhaps not committed crimes, but the system's been against them. And it's easy to besmirch somebody's reputation, but when the same names get bandied around for doing the same naughty things, then perhaps it makes you a bit pessimistic. So with that in mind, do you feel the Board of Control or the Welsh Area Council or whoever's under that jurisdiction, is there something that they should be doing about it, do you think? I think that they do. I mean, there are board control rules, I just think a lot of people don't adhere to them, and it's a big organisation. It's almost impossible to keep track on everybody. They've got limited funds, but I think they're doing the best they can, and I think that they've got these rules in place for a reason. They're to be followed. Not everybody follows them. I mean, it's in every walk of life. We've got laws for a reason. People break them. They don't always get caught, and it's almost impossible. Just like it's impossible for the state to obviously police every single individual. It's impossible for the board to police every single individual. But I will say this, when you're dragged before them, if you perhaps
broken their rules, they can be tough. They can be tough, and especially the Welsh board. The Welsh board are particularly tough, but they do what's in the best interest of the boxers. But I mean, you take it somebody like Jake Anthony, those types of fighters. After every fight, they have an invoice, and I break down perfectly where their money's gone, so they know exactly where it's gone. And not only that, but obviously, if they're declaring their money to the taxman, then of course, they can claim all kinds of expenses and stuff like that. The board advise every fighter at the very start when they're awarded their licence that, this isn't a tax-free income. So they're given all the advice, and the board push them in the right direction, but not everything can be policed.
Generally speaking, across the UK, I mean, how good a job do you think the British Boxing Board of Control are doing in managing and regulating British boxing?
I think that they do their best. I genuinely do. There are aspects of the Board of Control where I think perhaps they're being a little bit unrealistic from time to time. One thing I will say is this: safety is paramount, and we know that what their safety record is like. And they're outstanding in that department. They are absolutely outstanding. And I'll say this for the people who work in the board as well. It's a really tough job, being in that office day after day. And, the head office is in Cardiff. There's management contracts flying in. There's requests flying in. There's all kinds of stuff, paperwork's flying in on a daily basis, and the girls who work in that office are absolutely flat out regularly, and they absolutely do their best. I think they work their socks off, and they try their best to accommodate us to the best of their ability. I mean, if they can make something work for you, and if they got the time to do it, then they'll absolutely do their best. So, I've got no complaints. I've been before them a couple of times because I've been a naughty boy myself, shouting at referees and ranting and raving, and but I think that they've always been fair with me, so no complaints.
If there was one thing you could change about boxing across the world, what would that thing be? If you could just improve the sport in your eyes?
There's one thing I would do. There was one thing I would do, and it's difficult. I don't know how you would possibly change it, but certain promoters have got a grip on certain things. I mean, I am never, ever, probably ever going to have somebody fight at world level and maintain them as their manager at world level for a long time. It's possible, but it's very unlikely it's going to happen. I mean, Chris Sanagar's managed to do it with Lee Selby to a certain extent. Chris is very savvy, he's very shrewd. He's managed to do that with Selby, but it's so unusual. You will find that you'll have a kid at small hall show level, you'll get him to a certain level, and all of a sudden the bigger promoters will think, hang on, this kid's got something about him, and they'll start to turn their head, and people will start whispering to them, oh, hang on a minute, that guy, he's a bit low key for you, he's holding you back, he's holding you back, he's holding you back. And all of a sudden that larger promoter, they'll be all over him, they'll be telling them, well, you shouldn't be managed by that guy, he's holding you back, you need to be managed by our guy. And what they do is they'll put him in touch with a manager who essentially doesn't perhaps have their best interests at heart, somebody who's controlled completely by that promoter. And against British Boxing Board of Controls, it's a bit of a regulation, it's a bit of a loophole, but essentially that manager will be controlled by that promoter who's probably financed their entire setup top to bottom, and it goes without saying that that promoter is then completely monopolising that boxer, and that boxer can very quickly lose control of his career and his finances. I think that is something which is impossible to prevent happening, but it is something which bothers me as if you like, a manager who mostly has small hall show fighters. But the fear is that one day you'll find somebody who's a little bit special, and their integrity and their loyalty will be tested to the max by these big name promoters.
You mentioned small hall boxing. I know plenty of boxers, and no doubt you do as well, who very talented guys, and they're not getting on shows mainly because they can't sell tickets. I mean, how much of an issue in British boxing is ticket selling, or the lack of ability to sell tickets, and how much is it holding boxers back?
Massive issue, absolutely massive issue, and unfortunately there's nothing to be done about it. I've spoken at length about this on podcasts, etc. A lot of people say, it's not fair, Absolutely right, it's not fair. Let me put it to you in this manner. I often use this as an analogy to describe this. If you've got somebody like Wayne Rooney, even Steven Gerrard, top football players of my generation perhaps, probably go down in the history books. Now, if you said to them, let's say Everton Football Club says to Rooney when he's 16, he started with Everton, let's say they say it to Gerrard when he's 16, he started at Liverpool, right, we'd love to give you a place in the starting 11, boys, and we know you're good enough, but unless you sell 1,000 tickets in Anfield, you can't play today, you're not going out on the pitch today. those players would never be seen. And there are boxers like that who will never ever be seen, because although they've got the talent, they don't sell the tickets. But the unfortunate thing is this: you got Sky pumping billions, not millions, billions into football, and obviously there's a market for it, there's an audience for it with Sky Sports. Boxing doesn't have that market, doesn't have that audience, doesn't have that general appeal. It's not world-renowned general appeal like football is. So you haven't got the sponsorship pumping, millions, billions of pounds into the sport. You've got Sky Sports doing boxing with Eddie Hearn. I don't know what Eddie gets per show. I'm sure it's quite a prize. Sure it's figures that would eclipse anything, even close to what we're achieving at small hall level. But nevertheless, there's significant money there, but it's not so significant that it's the be-all and end-all like it is for football clubs. I think I read something like the team who finishes top of the Premiership or something like that gets 175 million in TV revenue, and that's without obviously endorsements, etc., stuff like that. Boxing suffers through a lack of inward investment from British business. Now, it's not the type of sport that can survive without inward investment from British business. That's where you get guys like Angelo Dragone, and I'm going to mention Gavin Gwynn here as well. I got tremendous amount of respect for Gavin Gwynn. I don't train him, I don't manage him, but nevertheless, he's a lovely kid, and I watch him from afar. I see the way he's managing his affairs. There's a guy called Phil Whaley, I think his name is, who helps manage his business affairs. He's another lovely guy, friend of one of my uncles actually, Eddie Hewish, Phil does his promotional stuff. He gets him sponsors, stuff like that. Angelo is very proactive in relation to stuff like that. Unless boxers have got that kind of income coming out, I'll tell you another good guy who's doing really well with stuff like this is Ciaran Gibbons, who's just won a Welsh title by beating Henry James over 10 rounds. These kids are really proactive. They do a really good job. The managers do a great job. And everybody's saying the same thing. Well, why aren't the promoters promoting? Why aren't the promoters promoting? Well, as you know, I've had a hand in promotions. When we did a show in Pontypool with Mo, myself, Gary, and Mo, I reached out to, I think it was, I can't remember off the top of my head, it's like close to 50 businesses in the local area, with a view to them perhaps sponsoring the event. And not a single one even was remotely interested, and only 3 out of the 50 even replied. Now, when you're not even getting replies, what chance have you got? A few years ago, when the British economy was perhaps doing a little bit better, people were a little bit more interested. Not only that, but people were, with the greatest respect to the British general public, people were a little bit less selfish. It's all about what can I have, what can I take away. People are a little bit self-centered, a little bit myopic. They only really think of themselves these days. Businesses, people are becoming a lot more selfish. So like, what can I grab, what can I have? And nobody's interested in really investing. And it's difficult. It's difficult with regards to the current economic climate, and I appreciate that. But it's crippling. It's crippling British boxing. It's crippling Welsh boxing in particular, because Wales is a struggling economy. But for these businesses, what I don't understand is this: these people are businessmen. They understand business, and the first thing they should understand is, if they invest in a boxer or if they invest in a promotion, this is tax deductible income. So you can give it to the boxer, or you can give it to the promotion and get something out of it and potentially boost your business. If you don't boost your business, you've lost nothing, because that money, if you're a profitable business, would have gone to the tax man anyway. So why not invest in a promotion? Why not invest in an individual? It just doesn't make sense to me if you're a profitable business. But people just don't think about that. They're just not interested. I have met a certain amount of resistance, even when it comes to putting up posters in shops. There are a lot of places, and what you'll find is, especially with boxing, it's a lot of working class places that will help you out, whereas the higher end shops, the higher end places, no interest, won't even let you put a poster in the window. It's unfortunate, but it's the climate that we've got. And it's not a case of promoters aren't promoting, it's a case of businesses aren't investing, promotion's not there, TV money's not there. You can't conjure money up just out of nowhere, and as a result the boys have to sell tickets, and if you're a good ticket seller, then your path could be laden with gold. unless you're supremely talented. And to use an example of somebody who's supremely talented, whose path will be laden with gold, and he deserves it because he's a tremendous talent for Wales, is Joey Cordina. I know Joe really well. He's a fantastic talent. He's a lovely boy, really lovely boy. Jesus, his talent level is through the roof, and I genuinely believe that Joe's going to win a world title. If I could put money on that and I would get decent odds, trust me, I'd be laying strong money on that. He's a tremendous kid, and he's a poster boy for Welsh boxing. But talent like that, talent levels like that are quite unusual. So in order to progress your career, in order to get the sparring you need, in order to travel to the places you need to go, you either need inward investment, you need a sponsor, or you need a promoter who's willing to invest in you in the hope that obviously the bigger fighters come along later. And if the big fighters come along later, and if you do get to the big promotions later, then as a small hall show promoter, as a small hall show manager, you've got to hope that guy stays loyal and that your investment is returned. Because if they don't, then you've lost everything and you're starting from scratch all over again. As a promoter, as a manager, you're willing to take that risk, you're willing to take that chance. Some are, some aren't. I've done my bit. I think last year it's cost me an absolute fortune. I slowed it down a little bit this year because financially it's really taken its toll, not just in relation to my finances, but in relation to my personal life as well, because obviously as a solicitor, some weeks I'm doing a 80-hour week. And then on top of that, I'm at the gym in my lunch hours, training Angelo. On Sunday mornings, I'm at Ammanford ABC. Towie ABC, Cass's gym, and I'm training Jake on Sunday mornings. I'm fitting other boys in on top of that as well. The toll this is taking on my life is incredible. I'm working a 90, maybe 100-hour week some weeks. I'm practically having no sleep. I'm doing police stations until 2, 3 in the morning. I'm back up at 6 in the morning, 7 in the morning. I'm in the office for 8 o'clock, 8:30. I'm in court, and then on top of that, they've got all this physical stuff as well. There's no time for me, which is why I'm now 21 stone. That's my excuse anyway.
So generally speaking, Rich, how healthy is Welsh boxing at the moment, would you say?
It's incredibly healthy at the moment. We've talked about Angelo Dragone being my little Rocky story, the guy who's come pretty much from nowhere. He's had a very average, I hope he'd forgive me for saying this, very average amateur record with just over 50-50 win ratio. He had a few good fights in the unlicensed circuit, and then he's come to me. He's improved tremendously as a boxer. He moves really well. You got Jake Anthony, who's a really good talent. Perhaps if he'd stayed in the amateur boxing a bit longer, he would have perhaps gone on, to become a much stronger, maybe fighting on a higher level in the amateurs and achieve things, on a British level or above. You got Spencer Thomas, who's left it a little bit late. Then you got the guys like Robert Stadzinski, who are in it for the money, wants to retire back to Poland. But I've got quite a range of fighters there, on top of the guys that I've got, from the northeast. And then you look at other gyms. Sanagar's got some good little Welsh fighters. You've got likes of Gavin Gwynn. Oh, and somebody I didn't mention, which I should have mentioned, who's recently come back, who's been supported by the Newport's Rocky project with Joanne Berendi and of course Luke Pearce from the famous Pearce family. David Pearce, obviously former British heavyweight champion. Craig Woodruff is coming on really well, and there are offers in place in relation to Craig. He'll fight for titles soon, and he's got the ability to do it. He ran Luke Campbell very close. I've got quite a wide spectrum of talent in relation to my guys, from top to bottom, from journeymen to guys who are potentially champions. Like I said, you've got Sanagar. He's got the Selbys. Both of them. He's got the likes of Gavin Gwynn. I think he still manages Nathan Thorley, who's a fantastic talent. But then you look at Gary Lockett's gym, and packed with talent, especially young talent. And Gary's boys, a lot of them are a level above my guys. And you look at guys like Rhys Edwards, absolutely, what a lovely kid, really nice kid, very funny. Him and his dad, so you'd be familiar with his dad, Nance. Fantastic, and it's a great gym to be around. It's fantastic to be around these characters. But the talent level these guys have got, Thorley, Edwards, obviously, big shout out to Chris Jenkins, who's just won the British title. You've got all these guys around the gym. It's a fantastic atmosphere there, and the talent levels that Gary's got in his gym, fantastic for Welsh boxing. And Gary, he does have a reputation sometimes for being a bit surly. Yeah, that's a great description for it. But trust me, he's nothing like. Well, he's nothing like that. He's actually an exceptionally emotional, exceptionally funny guy, very dry sense of humour, and he's been great to me. He's been absolutely great to me. Like I said, he was levels and levels above me in the amateurs. Everyone was scared to death of fighting him, You know, we'd walk into the room and he'd be like, oh, you know, being the Welsh Championships, and everybody at his weight, oh, you know, Gary Lockett's here, he's not injured. You know, people would start withdrawing. He'd end up fighting somebody in the finals. But, you know, he was at that level. Obviously, he went on then in his professional career. He was a world champion with the WBU. The greatest respect meant something. You know, he was there when people like Ricky Hatton were winning that title and defending it. And then, of course, he fought Kelly Pavlik, who pound for pound was in the top 3 of the world in Atlantic City. I mean, you know, there's not a lot. Aside from winning that world title, and bear in mind the guy he was fighting and the difficulties he was having at the time, aside from actually winning that world title, what hasn't he done in boxing? And, you know, I got out to turn to for advice. So I'm blessed, and Welsh boxing is blessed, because between myself, him, Sanagar, Mo Pryor, who manages a lot of the guys in Gary's gym, you know, the outlook for Welsh boxing is absolutely fantastic. And the Welsh public are blessed. And what they should do is come to a small hall show, see these guys, see them at the start of their careers. Because a lot of these guys, especially guys like Rhys Edwards, fantastic, really talented. Jay Harris, dear Lord, Jay Harris just been announced June the 1st, fighting for the European title. I mean, he's a small guy. A lot of these smaller lads have got a reputation for not being bangers. 15 wins. Every one of his fights a win. 15 wins, 8 stoppages. You know, he's got just above a 50% stoppage ratio, which for a smaller guy is incredible. He's a really talented fighter, and he can bang. He's exciting. You know, people should be going along and watching these guys. It's an MTK show. It will be televised, but, you know, it wasn't that long ago that he was fighting on a small hall show, you know, with Mo Pryor in Swansea. I mean, he was Commonwealth champion then. Imagine paying 60 quid for a ticket and being ringside and saying, you know, you watch the Commonwealth champion. People don't realise what they're missing out on. The Welsh public, truly, they've got opportunities to see these guys coming up, you know, up close and personal for a very small amount of money. They don't always take it, and I think they're foolish, because the opportunities are there to watch really high quality boxing for a very low price.
And you mentioned Mansell Edwards there. I got to say thank you to Mansell, because actually Mansell was the man who said, I don't know if you know this, I think when I spoke to you, maybe it was Angelo's last fight, or maybe a couple of fights ago, Angelo said, you need to sit down with Richie and have a good long chat with him about boxing. So there we are, Mansell. I'm sitting with the man himself.
Do you know what? He's such a lovely guy. He's so funny. I love him to bits. But everybody in Gary's gym is fantastic. I mean, even Dan Gums, you know, from Demon Shield, fantastic characters. Everybody in there, you know, you got Tony, Big Tony Williams. Honest to God, you go there and it's absolutely amazing. I mean, you know, Craig's back and forth to gym sometimes, and I'm wondering if he's going to make a comeback. There's talk of it, perhaps. Craig Kennedy making a comeback. You know, he's with Gary. He's had one fight under Gary, I think, and, you know, he's dipping his toe in and out, and I'm not sure if he's 100% sure on what he wants to do. But, you know, his dad Walter's always around the gym as well, and, you know, all these characters around the gym, it really, I mean, you know, it's not really a chore for Gary to wake up in the morning and go to the gym, is it? He's, you know, he's having a chat, he's having a laugh with his mates, people like Mansell, people like Wally, people like Tony, you know, all these characters, all these guys, people like Dan Gums. You know, what a fantastic way to wake up, spend your day just having a chat and a laugh with his mates, you know, and then he does a few personals and then he hits the cafe. Sometimes, I mean, he hits the cafe so often, I wonder why he doesn't look like me.
And I think you're just saying there, Rich, I mean, that basically sums up, I think, why so many people like yourself are involved in boxing. And you're not there for the money. I mean, it's great if you become rich from boxing. No doubt you won't turn it down. But you're just there because you love the sport, basically.
Oh, absolutely. And the characters within it. You know, don't get me wrong. It's a cutthroat sport, and there are times, you know, when you just think, Jesus, why am I doing this? You know, sometimes you have a phone call, and, you know, there's sometimes a bit of animosity in boxing, and you know, fall out with people. You know, you perhaps make up with them, perhaps you don't. But there's sometimes a bit of animosity in boxing, especially when it comes to the business end of things. But then, when you've got a gym like Gary's, and, you know, I don't have my own gym, I've got a stable, but what I'll do is I'll travel to the gyms which are convenient to the boys to train in, and I'll give them my time and attention, and especially I'll sharpen their tools. You know, we've got the use of so many good facilities, and all the people who own these gyms, they're fantastic. I mean, we're here today in Chris Ware's gym in Port Talbot, and, you know, Chris is absolutely fantastic. He's been so good, former Welsh middleweight champion, you know, since retired. You know, he's a businessman, he runs these gyms, and, you know, he's good as gold. He does his best to promote Welsh boxing in every aspect, from, you know, grassroots right up to the top levels. You know, he'll always do his best to push somebody on, to promote somebody, you know, even to sponsor people. You know, he sponsored James Lilly. Chris is a lovely guy, and, you know, the people that he's got working around him as well. You know, he's got like Gemma Pegler in the Swansea Funky Pump, who, obviously daughter of the great Jeff. So there's all these people around. There's all these people who are willing to offer help and support. You've got Cass up in Terry ABC. You've got Carl Samuels, Jerome's uncle, who runs Allway ABC in Newport. Everybody is so accommodating. Everybody's, and when you go to these gyms, it's very unusual for you to face any kind of animosity because everybody's so welcoming and everybody's so giving. And the community of boxing in Wales is absolutely fantastic at the moment. And what I would do is I would encourage anybody, any youngsters, because when I was a little bit younger, some gyms could be really intimidating. It's not like that anymore. It's really not like that anymore. And wherever you go, you'll be made to feel welcome, and you'll be given a lot of time and attention. And boxing is a fantastic sport for improving discipline, for improving concentration levels. Even people with disabilities now are finding their ways into boxing gyms and being taught and being helped out, and it gives them a focus and it gives them drive and determination when sometimes they might be a little bit depressed. And mental health is massive as well in boxing. And mental health is, massive, every day at the moment. There's so much anxiety and depression in the world, and mental health is something which is very important. But boxing is a fantastic release. It's a great release. It's disappointing myself with all the pressures and stresses that I suffer with work, and obviously with trying to progress the guys' careers, that I can't spend a bit more time in the gym myself. Because I'm 44 now, but if I could put the gloves on and do it all again, I would do it all again because I love it, and to be a part of it and not be able to do it is sometimes very difficult. It's a heartbreaker.
You touched on it earlier. You mentioned Angelo's unlicensed boxing background. Another thing that has come along in the last sort of 5 years or so is white collar boxing.
Yeah.
It's been a bit difficult, I think, for a lot of people in established boxing, border control boxing, and amateur boxing, but how to deal with white collar boxing or white collar boxers, and the whole do you allow white collar boxers to turn over to amateur boxing under WABA or the English ABA, or do you allow white collar boxers to box under the border control? I mean, what's your thoughts?
If you're good enough, the WABA was a reasonably good setup. We all knew for a very long time that there were things going on within the organisation. There was a lot of unfairness. It's in every aspect of every organisation, in every society. There's going to be people in a position of power, trust, authority who are going to abuse that because they're going to want to get out of that organisation what they want to improve their own lives. Crisis in politics now. You only have to look at Brexit. We're an absolute shambles. Whether you love it, whether you hate it, the vote was there. And now,
I'm saying stop there, Rich. This is a no Brexit zone.
Non-Brexit, but people are abusing their power, and it's in every organisation. We've seen MPs do it now. We've seen people do it in organisations, but the WABA has been overhauled a little bit. I've been to a lot of amateur shows more recently. I've been to a few English shows. Sometimes I go to the WABA finals and stuff to see what kind of talent is coming through and stuff like that. And if you want to turn over, I think if you've done a bit of unlicensed or if you've done a bit of white collar, and if you want to turn over and go into WABA, I don't think it's a massive problem. And if you think that you're good enough, and if you go to the British Boxing Board of Control and you say to them, well, look, I want to turn pro, and you say, this is what I've done, I don't think they're too happy about it. It's very much frowned upon. And I think it's frowned upon not necessarily for any other reason than sometimes the standard can be a bit low. Sometimes the matchmaking isn't the best. And those records can't massively be relied upon. I mean, you could have a guy who's 22-0 as a white collar boxer, but he could have fought every guy that stumbled out of a bar. You just never know, because you never know what sort of organisations he's fought under, how careful the matchmaking's been. But they've got a test. You can do a test whereby they'll watch you spar, they'll watch you train, and if the British Board of Control feel that you're good enough, then they'll give you a licence. They'll give you a licence, and that's a positive thing, because to come under the British Board of Control auspices, you're coming into a much stronger organisation. You're coming into an organisation which, and I've said it before, safety is paramount, and to me, safety is the most important thing in the world. I was part of Gary's gym back and forth there when Nick got injured tragically, and everything was done. I mean, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, maybe Nick wouldn't have made it. We've seen what happened with Mike Towell. Boxing is such a dangerous sport. And the Border Control do everything they can to make this as safe a sport as possible. And I've seen injuries happen in white-collar boxing. In fact, a guy I was representing, I certainly won't name any names, of course, but he had a Crown Court trial. Weekend before he fought a white-collar boxing match, ended up in hospital with bruising on the brain. Now, he missed his Crown Court trial as a result of that. I didn't know he was fighting, in a white-collar boxing match, and I certainly, as a solicitor, wouldn't have advised him to do so the week before a trial. But the safety procedures weren't in place. He got knocked out. He was unconscious on the ropes. He took a few more punches, from what I understand, from what I'm told. He lost 14 hours of his life, woke up with, bells ringing in his head, ended up in a Royal Glen Hospital where he was given excellent treatment. But, there was no medical supervision there. There was no... nobody to advise him in relation to what to do. He's knocked spark out on the ropes, and of course it goes without saying that those kind of safety procedures, this thing is non-stop. Those kind of safety procedures, they've got to be adhered to in accordance with British Border Control standards. Now, when we run the promotions, I know what it costs. I know what it costs to bring the doctors on board, to bring the ambulance on board, to have an anaesthetist ringside. I know what it costs. It costs an absolute fortune. And those are the type of things which root the purpose of boxers having to sell a lot of tickets, because the shows are not cheap to run. There's a lot of things which have got to be covered, but a lot of those things are medical requirements, and it's in the boxer's best interest, it's in the promoter's best interest, it's in the British Boxing Board of Controls, it's in boxing's best interest, and nobody does it better than the British Boxing Board of Control.
Something that's become more prevalent, and it's got positives and negatives, I think, in my own opinion, over the last 20 years or so within boxing and in life in general, society in general, is social media. I know you've, and myself as well, been on the positive side of it and the negative side of it. I mean, what's your thoughts, Rich?
Not a massive fan of social media. I'm not on Facebook. It goes through the courts every day. I've had so many clients that have used social media, Facebook in particular, as a defence. I've also had a lot of cases which my client have been hung on the basis of things they've said and done on social media. From a personal injury perspective, I work closely with a firm that does a lot of personal injury work. There've been people caught out on social media, all those types of things. It is literally, from a legal perspective, the tool of the devil. As far as boxing goes, it's a fantastic platform. It's a great tool if it's used properly and effectively. Like I said, I'm not on Facebook, not interested. I see it as a very negative thing, Facebook. Twitter, you'll see me tweeting legal things, you'll see me tweeting about the boxers, and on the odd occasion I'll throw an opinion in on this, that or the other. But generally, I don't ever put anything too personal on, because it's a tool, and it should be treated as a tool. But these things can get incredibly personal. I've been subject to personal attacks, and I've given it back to a few people as well. Sometimes it's not a pleasant platform, but it is fantastic for boxers with regards to ticket selling. I mean, before social media come along, people would literally be on the streets, in the pubs, out late at night trying to sell tickets. Now they can stick a post up and reach 100,000 people. I mean, we tried to do it for... with the promotions, and incredibly, and I'll throw this figure out. I think we had a 100,000 person reach, because you can do a promoted tweet. And in the last show, I thought I would throw a few quid into this, and we'll, so I said to Mo, will you give me the go ahead? I want to do a social media post and get it out to everybody. And the way it works is you tag in people's interests, and if they're interested. So, for example, the show was in Llandarcy, so I type in South Wales, West Wales, boxing, combat sports, stuff like that. So everybody with those personal interests, it all flashes up. This message goes out to them, this tweet goes out to them, this Facebook post goes out to them. I think we had 100,000 person reach. I was expecting it to sell a few tickets. We didn't get not a single sale. But I think it's different for the boxers on a more personal level. They can add a personal touch. There's people they haven't been in touch with for a long time, people they wouldn't know how to get hold of. Social media, Facebook in particular, provides a tremendous platform for them to do that. And no doubt in my mind it boosts ticket sales, but it's got to be used effectively, it's got to be used properly. And ironically, and I'll make no secret of this, is something which myself and Craig Woodruff's team have spoken about in relation to effective use of his social media. Because, Craig, again, transparency from me, not a single boxing tweet for a month with a fight coming up, and yet he'll stick a picture of a banana with an abusive words sat in a microwave. Seriously, seriously. this is a business, and it's a tool which can be used for business. It can be used positively, but it's got to be used properly and effectively.
And of course, you've got, talking social media, you've got the Turn the Lights Out podcast, which is David Owen and James Lilly's. And do you want to just turn around and show the back of the hoodie to the camera?
I'll do my best.
If you just crouch down there, we'll zoom in. There we are. I don't know if you're watching this, James, but there you are. James Lilly gave me crabs, and that's not from me. If you want to sue someone, sue Rich.
Well, he's obsessed with the otters, isn't he? So otter on the back with a crab in his mouth there. He loves an otter, James, but he's into his wildlife, and I think the latest thing was bees. I think they were banging on about the demise of bees and how that's going to bring down the world, end of civilization as we know it. But yeah, it's a good little podcast. I've been on there. I think they reached out recently. They're getting hold of Alex Hughes and maybe Nathan Thorley to go on there, and they'll be on there. That'll be a fantastic coup for them because they're fantastic guys. Thorley's very funny, and Alex Hughes, what a boy. Again, I didn't mention Alex Hughes when I was talking about Lockless Gym. Sorry, mate. Yeah. World title aspirations for Alex, and he's certainly got the ability to get there and do it. He's a really, really talented kid. But not just that. I mean, he's from Mardy, which is a very difficult place to sell in. It's a small mining community. It's in the middle of nowhere, but Christ, I think he sells like 150, 200 tickets. He's got such a great following, and that just, that's a testament to the type of guy that he is. He's such a lovely guy. The community absolutely love him. They follow him everywhere he goes. Those are the types of followings that boxers need, and the public need to get out there and support these fighters. They need to buy the tickets off the likes of Alex Hughes, because ultimately what they're doing is they're contributing to a fighter's career. They're contributing towards pushing these guys on to the big time, and they can say they were a part of that, even in a very small way. They can say that they assisted. But to have those guys on the podcast, just going back to the podcast, it's not a conventional podcast. But if you want to have a bit of a chuckle, and if you don't take it too seriously, then you'll get a lot of enjoyment out of it. But James Lilly, obviously, another good fighter. He's featured in so many combat sports arenas. He's done the MMA, he's done the unlicensed boxing. I think he's a Welsh champion within the WABA system. He came through. He fought Jones for the Welsh title, for the Welsh middleweight title, which Jerome Samuels lost. So I think he got stopped in the 6th or the 8th round. I think it was the 8th. But he put up a great fight. He was doing really well for a long time, and he just ran out of a little bit of steam, I think. But he's talked about perhaps coming back. But he's involved as well with the BKB scene, which is an interesting scene as well. I suppose we should talk about it. I've watched a few of the fights online. They're brutal, but they're tough guys. Perhaps not always the most talented fighters in the world, but there are guys coming on board with them now. I mean, Curtis Woodhouse has talked about taking a bow. Tyler Goodjohn, who I do regard as a very good fighter, gutsy, hard, tough boy. There are lots of other. Paulie Malignaggi, former world champion, is talking about having a little pop at it now. There are really good fighters, but unfortunately, what you'll notice about these fighters is they're fighters that have come towards the end of their natural career within conventional boxing, and they're giving this a go because perhaps they find it a bit difficult to let go. But I understand from what I'm told that the safety procedures within the organisation is very good. That the doctors are very proactive in the fights. That the aftercare given to the boxers is very good as well, and it's a rising sport. There's a lot of public interest in the sport, and there's a lot of money in the sport as well, and the fighters are getting well paid doing it. So it is an attraction to people like James. But I would hope that he returns to the British Boxing Board of Control auspices perhaps very soon. I've spoken to James. He signed a managerial contract with me. Whether he wants to press on with that, I don't know. But I feel he's got something to offer. He's a talented fighter. He's gutsy. He's one of those guys. It's a part of his life, and he'll never want to let it go. But hopefully he'll realise when the time is right. And I hasten to add, it's not now. He's still got something left to offer. When the time's right, hopefully he'll recognise it and start passing the skills on that he's learned to younger fighters in places like Funky Pump gyms, in places like the amateur WABA boxing gyms, where he's got something to offer, and he can help progress the career of youngsters, whether it's through the amateur scene or whether it's through the pro scenes. But guys like that got lots to offer.
So as I guess you've all witness now. Richie's a very good talker.
Non-stop talking.
Which, which is great for somebody like me doing the interview. Have you got any funny boxing stories you want to tell us, Rich, that perhaps the public don't know about and that the public can know about?
Do you know what? Some they're not always mine. One of the funniest stories, when we did the Q&A, we did the Landarcy show, which featured Jay Harris, the one I was speaking about earlier, and after the show, we did a Q&A with Gary Lockett and Enzo Macronelli. Enzo is an absolutely fantastic guy. I don't like to say it to his face because there's always a bit of...
and you lost a bet to him.
Oh, gosh, yeah. I had to impart £100 into that man's already ample wallet. Let me tell you something. Richest man in Swansea. But yeah, I unfortunately lost the same bet to you, which was...
Mine was only £2 though.
Picking James De Gale over Chris Eubank Jr. I definitely got that one wrong. But yeah, £100 to Enzo and £2 to you in due course, and I've got to wear a T-shirt, so of your taste. But I'm not looking forward to that. I've got to be honest. I'm not sure what you got in mind, but we'll save that for the next one. I was hoping we'd get it out the way today. But Enzo's a fantastic guy. I did the Q&A with him and Gary, and they told a lot of stories about their time in Russia when Enzo fought Roy Jones Jr. And I won't tell you about them. But if you ever see these guys, approach them because they're very approachable guys. Alex Hughes was involved in this story as well. Zach Davis from out West Wales. Yeah, you know the story. I won't tell you about it. But boxing is a rich tapestry of stories. There's guys. I mean, boxers are so approachable. They'll talk to you. They'll give you their time. They'll take a selfie with you. Only once have I ever seen a boxer be aggressive towards fans, and he was a very high level boxer, and in fact he's a fan's favourite, and I might not have expected it of him, but it was Tyson Fury. But perhaps on that evening he was having an off night and he was just upset with so many people bothering him. But he'd gone along and he was ringside to watch Anthony Joshua. To be fair, he was being mobbed. There was a lot of people around him asking for selfies, asking for this and that, and he got a little bit aggressive towards him, which wasn't nice to see. But on every other level, even guys like Joshua, I've never seen them turn the public down. I've never seen them turn the public down. And these guys are so full of stories, and if you engage with them, they'll engage back, and you'll gain a lot from them. But to speak to people like Gary and to be able to deliver to, I think there's about 75, 100 people, and talk to them about their experiences in Russia when Enzo was what was described as cannon fodder, to go over to Russia and be beaten up by Roy Jones, and of course he came out on top. Terrible knockout for Roy. That Enzo's always had tremendous power, which is why I'm very glad that I never had to share a ring with him, because who knows, I might not be here today if I had.
One funny story regarding you that I mentioned to you earlier, and I heard the story secondhand, so I apologise, it's not 100% accurate, but Chris Jenkins down in Gary's gym recently said something along the lines of, that Richie Garner, he's always in trouble, isn't he? Always in trouble. And someone said, well, what do you mean? They said, well, he's always put on Twitter, he's always in court, it was in court again, he's always in court, what's he doing all the time?
Yeah. Some of those probably are because I'm in trouble. But he's a fantastic guy, Chris. I can tell you stories about Chris. Christ, I mean, he's always said that him and Gary saved me from a hiding when we were up in Glasgow. He fought the Irish Australian lad. I can't remember his name. That's going to drive me mental until I remember it. But he fought this lad for, I think it was the Pan American or Pan Australian title, which he could have won but could never have defended. So just to put that in context, he's fighting an Irish guy out of Australia for an Australian title in Glasgow. You just couldn't make that up, could you? And I go along as part of the team as his cuts man, and there's me, there's Gary, there's Chris. And like being around those two, like I said, Gary's got a reputation of being a bit dour, but trust me, he's nothing like that. And the entire weekend I did nothing but laugh and smile. And while we're out there, Chris gets cut, lost the fight on a cut. He was absolutely devastated. We end up in Glasgow Royal Infirmary. I will say this, the NHS do a fantastic job, but Jesus Christ, what they did to Chris did him no favours at all. And, we've talked about the British Boxing Board of Control and how good they are. Dr. Neil Scott got Chris home early, got him stitched up properly, and probably saved his career, because the job that was done on Chris in Glasgow Royal Infirmary was just criminal. He had 4 stitches in something which required something like 27.
Yeah, just for people to know, Dr. Neil Scott, I believe, is a doctor who's involved in the Welsh Area Council, the Board of Control.
And he works all over. I mean, I've seen him at York Hall working ringside and stuff like that. Really busy, really dedicated to boxing. And like I said, he's probably saved Chris's career with his selflessness in getting Chris back from Glasgow early and taking the time out of in his own time to stitch him up and give it the proper attention that it deserved. But we're in Glasgow Royal Infirmary, and We had like a 5-hour wait, and there's me and Gary and there's Chris, and we're trying our best to keep Chris's spirits up because he's devastated. He's essentially not won the title through a cut, and this cut is huge. I mean, he looks like he's been hit with an axe, and we're doing our best to keep his spirits up. And I just nip off to the toilet. We had like a 5-hour wait, and typically while I'm in the toilet, he gets called in. So Gary goes in with him. They're in there for no more than 5 minutes, and then he comes out with these 4 stitches, which are terribly put in. And I'm like, what's going on here? What's going on with his eye? And Gary's like, they wouldn't give him more than that. They said, that'll do for now. And I was like, oh, Jesus Christ. I said, we're going to have to get this sorted. So as we're walking out then, this guy walks up to me, makes no attempt to get out of my way. I'm trying to get out of his. He's deliberately stepping in my way. And as we're going out the door then, he steps in my way and he says, what the fuck are you looking at? And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. Done everything I can to get out of his way. I got Chris next to me who's 10 stone soaking wet. Probably, he fights at about 10 stone. So, after he's fought and been a bit dehydrated, he's probably 9.5 stone, like this. I got Gary next to me who's, a bit bigger, but not the big lad. And then this guy picks on the 21 stoner. I just couldn't believe it. I'm like, what? Seriously? I'm looking left and right at these 2 smaller lads next to me, and he's like, what are you looking at? And we end up having a bit of a row, and then I wasn't too pleasant and offered him the car park, but he said, look, that guy only backed off because he saw you were with me and Gary. we saved you, and he's trust me, he's even put it on social media.
Well, perhaps that guy might be a boxing fan. He might have recognised Gary and Chris.
He might very well have, but whoever he fought before he wanted to take me on, he hadn't done too well against, so I'm not thinking he was too great a fighter because he already looked like he'd been messed up enough. But on that trip as well, so much happened on that trip. It was so funny on that trip as well. Gary loved this. He shared a room with me, and I got a deviated septum from boxing. I've taken a few shots, and when you got a nose like this, you can't get out of the way all the time. And as a result, I snore terribly, and I'm the first to admit it. I know I do. Anybody who shares a room with me, I honest to God, they are plagued by my snoring. I try to stay awake as late as I try to be as selfless as I can. I try and stay awake so that the person I'm sharing a room with falls asleep before me, because otherwise I know they're getting no sleep. And Gary had to suffer this, and I was waiting for him to go to sleep, and then I'd fall asleep. But my snoring was so bad on this occasion. He's smashing me with a pillow. Wake up, you bastard! And I'm like, oh man. So the 2 of us are getting no sleep, and on the second night he'd had enough. And at 5 a.m, he goes to Chris's room. Chris is in bed. He's only got 1 double bed, but Gary is absolutely exhausted by now. So he knocks on the door. It's 5 a.m, so Chris isn't quite with it. Just opens the door and wanders back to bed. Gary jumps into the bed with him. I'm pretty sure he's fully clothed. And Gary won't forgive me for saying this, but it's just us, and it's just us and thousands of watchers. And Gary's had quite a nice meal that night, courtesy of MTK, who put on the food for us, and he passes wind underneath the bed sheets. Chris Jenkins gets a tiny whiff of this in his semi-conscious state. Thinking it's one of his, he lifts the sheets a little bit, and then Gary's gassed him, and he jumps out of bed. And at this stage, he hasn't even realised Gary's in bed with him. Then realises there's a guy in bed with him, and completely loses the plot. He's jumping around the room, wondering what's going on. But that's where it's like being away with those guys. It's a really good laugh. You're constantly having a laugh. There's loads of banter. It's like being in the gym, but being away, it's a little bit different. And it's kind of, if you're fighting as the away opponent, such as Chris was that night, kind of got a them and us mentality, which brings you all a little bit closer, which is fantastic. But one of the funniest things that happened, and I'll tell you this, and this is a story I tell a few people, and this involves Craig Woodruff. Before I was involved with Craig, he was trained by Steve Sims, and he fought Mitch Buckland for the title, for the Celtic title. And I was in a corner with Steve, and Steve was very protective of Craig, and he would say to me, Richie, I don't mind you handing up to me, but one voice, my voice, no other voices. I don't want you saying anything to Craig. You hand up to me, and that's it. And I was like, yeah, okay, Steve, no problem. I was just happy to be a part of it. I like Craig; he's a lovely kid. Steve was kind enough to let me be a part of it. And first round, Mitch out jabs him, great jab, southpaw fighter, very difficult to pin down, great footwork. He out jabs Craig. Craig's not quite working hard enough. Second round, same again. And I'm thinking, Christ, he's letting this fight slip away from him. And Craig's a talented boy. He could do something here, but he's just not throwing. So going into the third round, I give Steve a nudge. Don't say anything to Craig. I said nothing to him at all, but I give Steve a nudge. I said, Steve, you've got to do something here. He's letting this fight get away from me. He's not throwing enough punches. Yeah, he says, you're right. I'll speak to him in a corner. So just before they go out for the third round, he says, Craig, he said, you're not throwing enough. You got to pick it up. Yeah, all right, Steve, he says. Third round, exactly the same. You know, Mitch goes out, jabs his head off. Craig's not throwing enough punches. He's closing the ring down, but he's just starting to get any shots off. So I just before the end of the third round, I say, fucking hell, Steve, you've got to do something. You know, this is an 8-round fight. You know, we're letting this get away from us. Yeah, he says, you're right. I give him a kick up the arse now. So comes back to, you know, end of the third round, comes back to the corner. Listen, you're letting this fight get away from you. You're going to lose this fight, he says. You've got to do something. Is there something wrong? No, he says, no. Well, go out there, throw more punches. Keep cutting the ring off, throw more punches. Yeah, no problem, Steve, no problem. Goes out for the fourth round, exactly the same. Just before he comes back at the end of, for the end of the fourth round, I said, Steve, this is it now. I said, you know, he's got to drop him, you know, to get a points victory and win every round. He's got to stop him. I said, you know, he's throwing his fight away. So comes back to the end, at the end of the round, he comes back, sits on the stool. Steve looks him in the eyes. He says, Craig, he said, is there something wrong? Because if there's something wrong, I'll fix it. Just tell me. Do you want me to pull you out of the fight? No, Steve. Well, there must be something wrong because you're not getting your shots off. What's wrong? Tell me what's wrong. And Craig looks him in the eye and says, what's wrong with me? Yeah, what's wrong, Craig? He says, my cock's too small, but I don't think you can do anything about it, Steve. And we're in the middle of a title fight. It's like an area title fight, but I'm just thinking, did I just hear and see that? Did I seriously hear and see that? And I'm just gobsmacked. And that stayed with me to this day, honest to God. And the look on Steve's face was just like,
so for once, Sammy Sims was lost for words.
Speechless. Absolutely, as was I. And trust me, I'm not often lost for words, Jesus.
Well, on that note, Rich, we'll end the interview. I think we probably touching on the longest interview in Welsh boxing history. I'll try and check Guinness Book of Records when I go home after. But thanks for your time, mate. And thanks for Chris Ware for letting us use your gym today. Always a great servant of Welsh boxing. And if you've got another couple of days spare, we'll try and catch up with Richie for another interview sometime in the near future.
Soon, yeah. Thank you.
Cheers, mate. Thank you. Cheers, Rich. Brilliant.